The father of the late Charles Maynard finally speaking out about why his family was disappointed by the Carifta Games opening ceremony.
See, they get politics mixed up in international stuff. After an international event.
The Christian Council responds to public criticism.
Every day we are working on behalf of the Bahamian people.
The latest on the Freedom of Information Act, plus yesterday's battle to become the king of barbecue.
It took about 1.5 years for us to really get to this point.
I'm Nakia DeVoe, and this is NB12 Weekend. Everyone, thanks for joining us this Sunday for NB12 Weekend. The government hailed the Carifta Games several weeks ago as a smashing success. However, not all in attendance were happy with how the games turned out. Specifically, the father of former Free National Movement chairman, the late Charles Maynard, who has been silent about why until now. He says officials went out of their way to invite Maynard's parents and children to the major event, insisting that they would pay tribute to the former Youth, Sports and Culture Minister. However, he says his son's name was barely mentioned. Vonig Toot reports.
Relatives of former Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, the late Charles Maynard, were among thousands who packed this stadium over the Easter holiday weekend for the opening of the Carifta Games. His father, Andrew Dutton Maynard, told NB12 that days before the big event, officials provided the family with VIP tickets and informed his son, Andrew, that they wanted to play a video tribute in memory of Charles, who died in Abaco last year.
Played parts of it for him, and he said, to see if he approved, and he said fine. He gave approval on behalf of the family.
The father of three says he applauded government at the time for recognizing his son's efforts to ensure the Bahamas hosted Carifta, and the fact that the National Stadium was officially opened while he served as minister. However, on the night of March 29th, Maynard says the hours-long ceremony started and ended, but the tribute was never played, and Charles's name was barely mentioned.
The president of the B3As mentioned Charles just in passing when he was doing his welcome. But you know, I thought that, I said, oh my God, they're going to surprise me because this thing probably is going to come up after he finished talking, Mike Sands. It didn't happen. So, and it didn't happen. I said, well, they must say, play the thing no more. I said, I tell you, I didn't believe they was going to play it anyhow.
But Maynard, who is a former Progressive Liberal Party chairman, says he's not surprised.
I didn't expect it to happen. I said Christie or Johnson will give orders that is not to happen. I don't know which one of them gave the orders, but it didn't happen.
Why didn't you expect it to happen?
No, because they're small men. They think small. All right? But they need to understand that you cannot change history by omission. See, they get politics mixed up in international stuff. After an international event.
To make matters worse, he says Prime Minister Perry Christie and Culture Minister Dr. Danny Johnson heaped praise on a long list of people during their remarks, but failed to give credit to those who deserved it.
But what annoyed me, not because that didn't happen, what annoyed me was the minister. You know, the old people say, sense don't hang to every dog tail. He got up there and he started mentioning ministers of sports. He didn't mention Peter Bettel, who was a PLP minister of sports.
Peter Bethel was responsible for the first Bahamas Games. Maynard says this snub did not go unnoticed by several Caribbean delegates he spoke with following the event. However, he says the family does not want or need an apology, insisting that his son's contributions to nation building cannot be erased just because they were not mentioned. Numerous attempts to reach Danny Johnson for comment were not successful up to news time. Reporting for NB12, I'm Vonig Toot.
Authorities intercepted more than 24 Haitian immigrants today in waters off the Exuma Keys. Sub-Lieutenant Origin Delaveau said a Royal Bahamas Defense Force patrol vessel came across the 35-foot wooden sloop around 10 a.m. He confirmed there were a total of 30 immigrants on board, 24 men, 1 woman, and 5 children. Now, up to press time, it was unclear how long the immigrants had been aboard the sloop or where they began their journey. Delaveau said immigration officials would determine those details, including identifying the boat's captain and whether the Bahamas was supposed to be their final destination during the processing stage of the investigation. Now, this month, the government signed a letter of intent to give the Defense Force $200 million for the purchase of assets, including 4 140-foot vessels, 4 110-foot vessels, and a roll-on, roll-off vessel. The funds will also cover the cost of dredging the Coral Harbor base and the construction of additional bases. Well, members of the public have accused the Christian Council of remaining quiet on too many important issues facing the nation. Church leaders were heavily criticized for their aggressive anti-gambling campaign, and many questioned why that issue is one of the few the group is willing to speak out against. Well, Council President Reverend Ranford Patterson told NB12 that many Bahamians are just unaware of what the Council is doing and highlighted how the church is constantly working to improve the country.
There are times when we are criticized. There are times when people say we're not doing enough. There are times when we do, they say we're doing too much. And so we're not going to be distracted by what people say. Every day we are doing stuff.
Several leaders of various churches joined the Christian Council to launch the Vote No campaign and persuade Bahamians to vote against gambling in the January 28th referendum. The group was very vocal and successful as the majority of Bahamians voted no to the legalization and regulation of the numbers business. But many question why the council hasn't taken similar stances against crime, domestic violence, and other issues. Reverend Patterson said the church addresses those issues on a daily basis.
Every day we are meeting with government agencies. Today we had a wonderful meeting with Urban Renewal that we have agreed that we're going to partner with them 100% to see how we can help to eradicate some of the social ills that we have. And so every day we are meeting, every day we are talking, every day we are participating in the development of our country.
We asked Reverend Patterson what issue the church will focus on now that it has crossed gambling off its list. He said the church doesn't deal with one issue at a time.
To say that whether there's one particular issue, I can't think of one particular issue. We have, for example, and I'm sure that the government will deal with it, the stem cell research. We have the same-sex marriage and a whole array of stuff that is coming down the pipeline that we have made up our minds that we're going to just continue to be the church. And whatever that means, that's what we're going to be. We continue to be the church. And so we're not worried about any issue that will arise in our country. Because once the church takes a stand on an issue, we are more than confident that the church will be victorious in it.
The Christian Council has recently been vocal on the issue of oil drilling in the Bahamas. Members of the council believe that the current arrangement between the government and the Bahamas Petroleum Company would not benefit Bahamians directly. The council is calling for a national sovereign trust fund. Opposition leader Dr. Hubert Minnis has expressed his skepticism of the accuracy of the recent crime stats. Last week, Police Commissioner Ellison Greenslade said that crime decreased by 13% compared to the same period last year. But Dr. Minnis said even if those figures are correct, a slight decrease is just not enough.
What they did not say was the fear of crime has increased. And as a result of that, individuals, their homes are like prisons. They're locked up in their homes. They're afraid to come out at night. They're afraid to come out at day. They're afraid to drive their cars because of car bumping and subsequently robbery. They admitted that shop breaking has increased. Armed robbery has increased.
The Free National Movement leader expressed concern over the warnings being given to cruise ship passengers who are traveling to the Bahamas. And while the warnings do not always advise passengers to stay on board, he believes they heighten travelers' fear of crime.
The message to you is don't go. And with time, you would have less passengers coming off, walking in onto your shores, walking into your stores, and it will have great economic impact in your downtown areas and on your economy. And eventually, if it continues, it can have impact on the number of cruise ships that come to your shores.
Minnis said that the Progressive Liberal Party treated crime as an F&M problem when it was in opposition. He called on the government to acknowledge that crime has always been a community problem and gave suggestions on how the government could begin reducing crime as well as the fear of crime.
They have to support the programs that exist within communities. And you must work with communities, you must work with the churches, you must work with the opposition, because it's a global event. It cannot be solved by one individual or one entity. But at the same time, you must display maturity.
Well, it's something that many Bahamians have been asking for, and Attorney General Allison Maynard Gibson said Wednesday the government wants to bring into force the Freedom of Information Act passed under the Ingram administration as soon as possible, but added that the law is being reviewed to ensure that the proper mechanisms are in place to support it.
There's some aspects of it that actually need to be addressed, and I think it would be related to process ADP.
Parliament passed the FOIA near the end of the Ingram administration's term. However, the legislation did not have an enforcement date. Director of Legal Affairs Deborah Fraser said the legislation is under review by the Law Reform and Revision Department in the Office of the Attorney General.
An opportunity now must be given to the present administration to have a look at that legislation and to ensure that everything is in place in order to bring it into force.
Is there a timeline?
No, I don't have a timeline, but it's under review.
The original bill was tabled in the House of Assembly in October of 2011 and had an enforcement date of July 1st, 2012. The former government later withdrew that bill and replaced it with a modified version. The new bill reduced the fine an offender will face for contravening the legislation from $100,000 to $10,000 and restricted rights to access to public information to Bahamians or permanent residents. Under the legislation, not all government information will be available for public consumption, including records that would prejudice the country's security, confidential communication to the government by or on behalf of a foreign jurisdiction or international organization, and information which could jeopardize the security of a person and cabinet papers. Well, coming up on NB12 Weekend, we'll tell you about the push for understanding just how many people are afflicted with Parkinson's in the country.
It is caused by negligent substance or black substance in the brain.
Stay tuned to NB12 Weekend to find out more.